Today we're going to be talking about diabetes technology and the privileged bubble. And to chat on this topic today, we are very, very lucky to have Renza Scibilia from Melbourne, Australia here with us today. So before we introduce her, my name is Ashley and I'm one of the co-founders of Be the Change. So again, we're very excited to have you here today, Renza. I'll pass it over to you to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Ashley. So hi, everybody. I'm Renza Scibilia. I am from Melbourne, Australia. I have type 1 diabetes. I have a blog called Diabetogenic. I'm also a diabetes advocate and health activist as well. And I also work for a diabetes organisation. So I'm the wearer of very many hats in this world. And I guess I have two real areas of particular interest. And one of them is about language and health, especially language and diabetes. But the other is, I guess, what I'm here for today. And that's to talk about technology across the world and how different it is for people everywhere to access new technologies. So I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. Thank you so much to the Be the Change team for inviting me. And I'm going to pass over to Rob now. So thank you.
Thank you, Renza, and welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us again this month for our virtual roundtable. We're really excited not only have Renza, an expert and truly an advocate for everyone around the world with diabetes, but to focus on a hugely important topic, and that is technology. And it actually wasn't until our conversation, Renza, a few weeks ago where we actually started to dissect how we define technology, how we look at technology and innovation, and really get a good understanding of where we are today with diabetes technology, both at the cutting edge of what diabetes technology is and things like CGM and the artificial pancreas, but really looking at it across that spectrum to areas like making sure people have access to the basic of technology, and that is things like syringes and blood glucose monitors. And we are all here today virtually through a Facebook roundtable, and we'll be continuing these roundtables, but we have to acknowledge that, we are in a bubble. We are able to educate ourselves through technology, whether that's your computer or your mobile phone, and we're able to understand what others are doing to advance diabetes technology, but also what is going on in the world that we're able to access or what we're able to learn. And that is really where we want to focus our time today, and to say that, technology in diabetes is advancing at an incredible rate, which is super exciting. And that's usually what I hear about. But there's also this gap that's starting to develop around the world, because whether you live in the United States, like myself, located in Chicago, Australia, or anywhere around the world, there is what you perceive as technology, and we're really curious about what you all, define technology as, and we'll get into that here today. So technology is one of the most, if not the most, passionate, but I'm most passionate about areas in life. So really excited to share my perspective on that today, and glad that Renza is able to join us, as well as Ashley and all of you. To kick us off, Ashley, I'm curious of what your perspective is. Like, how do you perceive technology? How do you define it? What do you see as innovation in diabetes from where you are in Melbourne, Australia?
Thanks, Rob. So I think in terms of diabetes technology, and what I perceive as, innovation, and what generally thoughts come to mind is, the insulin pumps, CGMs, but also diabetes apps. There's so many apps out there, and each one of them aim to sort of make life with diabetes a bit easier. So for me, I think thinking about innovation, it goes towards how these new technologies can come into play and how they can help us live our life to the fullest. But it's also interesting because I'm starkly aware that diabetes technology is very expensive. So for me personally, I can barely afford CGM on an ongoing basis. I use it when I need to or when I'm feeling burnt out. So, that cost is driving a huge wedge in people who access technology. and also the latest innovations that come up. Like for me, what's the point of having such amazing discoveries being made all the time and new inventions coming out when majority of people with diabetes can't even access that? So for me, that's something that is always on my mind and I'm quite conscious about. But I'm interested to hear what Renza thinks about that too.
I think that I think of technology as being on a very, very broad spectrum. So, I actually even think that injections and syringes are technology. If you think about how they're developing and moving, and we have smart pens and all sorts of things. And then we're also talking about hybrid closed loop systems that are just about to be released on the market. And, I think that it is such a broad spectrum, and people's access is equally on a spectrum, I guess, as well. I find it, I guess I'm in a position where I'm so fortunate that I personally am able to afford to use what I need to use and what I want to use. But I am very, very conscious that that's not the case for a lot of people. It's all a very big announcement about a CGM access initiative funded by the government, but it's only for people up to the age of 21 or under 21 actually. So that's still leaving a lot of people who are not able to access technology affordably. And it's also, it's exclusively for people with type 1, and the same with other initiatives that we have here as well. So I'm very, very interested to hear what's going on and what sort of programs, I guess, are being developed, and also just to raise awareness, I guess, of the issues as well. I think that that's really important. And I think that we've got a very long way to go. I see the gap between those who can afford and those who can't afford is getting broader and broader. It's becoming really, really very, very broad.
And Renza, so, we had our conversation. We've talked before, we've had our conversation a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about this bubble, and it's not just, geography or where you are regionally around the world, but whether it's, financially, being able to access these advancing technologies from a regulatory standpoint, from an economic standpoint, but also, people with type 1 diabetes are, sometimes viewed as people that are needing more, or they might need the most cutting edge or leading edge of the technologies. And obviously that isn't accurate to, folks that would be able to benefit from these technologies that have type 2 diabetes. So we look at this bubble, again, both financially, regionally, and where you are around the world, but how else do we see this bubble? Because I also see it with news and how I'm educated and how I perceive and understand what's going on, with the largest companies, like Dexcom and with Insulet and with Medtronic and all of the blood glucose monitor players. And you can even include the BDs of the world that are creating syringes. But how are we able to bring that education level to an area where all folks with diabetes are able to understand what is available to them, what they need to do to ultimately benefit and live a long and happy and healthy life with the most simple of technologies, which is like a blood glucose monitor, insulin, which we talked with Elizabeth Rowley last roundtable about, and a syringe. Like how do we bring that to the forefront to say that we need to continue innovating, we need to continue, advancing where we are with CGMs, with monitors, with insulin pumps. But also there's this lag. There is this need to bring the most basic of these technologies to people that are still unable to even get their blood glucose readings.
Yeah, Rob, I actually wrote about this after being at the ATTD conference earlier this year. So that was in Paris, and I'm sitting there at this conference center hearing about the latest and greatest technologies and advances in new insulins and where we're going and all these incredibly advanced algorithms. And, it was quite remarkable hearing what's coming. And I was actually sitting there saying, there are people around the world who can't access insulin, and I'm sitting here getting excited because in a few years' time I might be able to access a closed loop, system. So it is and I'm a bit of a tech head. I get really excited. I'm really geeky about all of this stuff, and I'm dying to be able to access it. And I don't want to stop, and I don't think I should have to stop feeling that way. But at the same time, I think it's really, really important that what is happening at the other end of the spectrum is constantly recognised, and we're trying to do better. So you mentioned Elizabeth Rowley and Type 1 International, and I'm constantly just in awe of the work that they're doing, and I think that it's just so important. And we really need to be able to do whatever we can do to build that up and to be involved in programs like that while we can still be at the other end. It's okay for us still to be excited about the other end of the spectrum as well. But I personally feel, and this is a very personal thing, so not everybody obviously has to feel this way, but I do feel a responsibility to being able, I guess, to do what I can. And that might mean, talking about and promoting things like programs like Insulin for Life or Life for a Child. The Spare a Rose, Save a Child campaign is wonderful. Insulin for Life Global, all of those initiatives, and doing what I can to support them. And I thought I have a great responsibility to do that because I can. And, I guess it's up to people to feel, to do what they feel comfortable doing. Somebody said to me once, "Oh, you're only doing that because it alleviates your guilt." And you know what? Yeah, I do have some guilt, but equally I'm doing these things because I feel very committed to trying to, raise funds and raise awareness about what the situation is elsewhere.
Yeah, Renza, that's really interesting because I always think about the guilt that comes, when I get really excited for the latest technology that comes to Australia, which is quite rare, and you say, "Oh, this is really exciting." And then you think about people who can't even access or struggle to access things like insulin and syringes. That guilt really burdens you. And I think it's great that you suggested some little simple things that we can do to help not just alleviate the guilt, but what we can do from our control is helping grants and people like Insulin for Life or Life for a Child, and things like that, raising awareness for those foundations and those groups. I think that's equally important as well. But what do you feel about, what do you think about, as diabetes advocates, we often get invited to, different workshops and different conferences and events. And sometimes I think there is that guilt that we're being allowed to access these things, whereas how do you think we should include other diabetes advocates in that conversation as well? Do you think, the live tweetings the way to go, or, writing blogs after the event and things like that? Or I'm just keen to hear your thoughts on that, Renza.
That is such a minefield at the moment, Ash. I feel like you've just totally thrown me in the deep end there, but that's okay. I think the first thing the discussion that we have to have first about that is, what is the role of people with diabetes and advocates and, writers, whatever, being present at things, whether it be a health professional conference, or invited by a device or a pharma company to sit around a table and have a conversation? Do we have a place there? Now, I am very much of the camp, you bet we do. Because if you're talking about diabetes and you don't have people with diabetes in the room, you're not doing it properly. It's that simple. And I'm constantly frustrated that there are diabetes conferences happening and there are no people with diabetes sitting there. The whole "nothing about us without us" mantra is, very, very firmly embedded in pretty much everything that I think, really. So, yeah, you bet we have, I guess, online contributor, and, you're part of the world that is, and you have a bit of a profile. And I don't mean that in a way that, because as I say, really outside of the diabetes world and a small part of the diabetes world, we're not really known. But that's why we get invited. That's the first thing. And also, I mean, let's be serious. People know that if we're invited, we're going to be talking about it. And I feel a great responsibility, again, that if I am sitting in the room, that it's not just for me. My job there is to share whatever it is that I'm hearing and learning with as many people as possible. So I think we've got to be really careful about how we have the discussion, because, yeah, absolutely, people should be there. We shouldn't feel guilty about being there. Well, why are you always invited? Well, the people who I guess are invited are the ones who then do go on and communicate it and share about what's going on, and are willing to be part of the conversation when it comes to software designs and devices and all sorts of things. So I don't know if I've answered that or if I've just really skated around the edges, because it is such, I guess, a contentious issue at the moment. Yes.
So Renza, I have a question for you. This is going to be a hard one. And I know that, this is very much a conversation. And so you talk about, and I think we all understand that there is this advocacy and investment in innovation, in understanding what is needed for people with diabetes. And you talked about, these organizations and companies get to hear from us, people with type 1 diabetes that are tech savvy, younger, but they're therefore kind of inoculated into this bubble that we are living in ourselves. And so how do we, as people with, diabetes, whether type 1 or type 2, or no matter where we are in the world, how do we advocate for diabetes at large? Because I want to go to these conferences and speak on behalf of my experiences, speak on behalf of my friends and what I've learned through living with diabetes for over 25 years. But at the same time, are we creating more of this bubble and expanding this bubble where, maybe we can be doing a better job of speaking on behalf of everyone else? Or should we not be speaking on behalf of everyone else? And should we be trying to promote their voices?
Firstly, thank you, Rob, for including me in the young people, because I'm really not, but that's very kind of you. And now you're my favorite person in the world. But yeah, look, this is a really, really important thing. I'm frequently invited to speak in front of healthcare professionals as here's one we prepared earlier. So Renza has diabetes and she's now going to tell you what it's like to live with diabetes. And I take probably about the first 10 minutes of any talk I do saying, I'm not normal. Let's be really, really clear about that. Okay, so I live in a developed country. I live very close to a major capital city. The closest tertiary hospital is a 5-minute drive from where I live. I have my endocrinologist's phone number on my mobile phone. I have access to everything. I can afford treatment. I can afford care. An insulin prescription for me that lasts about 3 months cost me $40. I feel a great responsibility to speak about my own diabetes and my own diabetes only, because I'm really, really good on that. I'm pretty much the world expert on that, but I'm absolutely not on anybody else's diabetes. But what I can do is say you have to have people with diabetes at the table, and that can't always be people like us. It really can't. It's not fair. And I think that one of the real issues that we have is that it's always people with type 1. We're always the ones who get, rolled out, and often it's little kids or young people who are living these great, amazing lives and climbing Mount Everest and doing all these really great things. And that's awesome, because these stories in no way should be any less important or valuable than people who are struggling a lot more. But I do think that I can't speak for a person with type 2 living in a rural area who's really struggling with their diabetes. I'm the expert on my own diabetes, but that's where it starts and ends. I'm not an expert on somebody else's. But I guess sorry, go on, you go.
Yeah, no, so I'm just curious. So with, again, with like advocating more and more about our own experiences, in trying to, whether it be kind of, communicate or explain what we're living with, and maybe it's not on us, maybe it's not on people with diabetes, type 1, type 2, no matter where you are in the world, maybe it's on these organizations. Is there an opportunity for them to tap into this knowledge base that might not feel necessarily empowered to talk about their diabetes or talk about their situation because it's not exactly on that leading edge, or maybe it's not exactly what is considered by the media or the news to be the most attractive? Because I know, again, we talk about CGMs and pumps and AI and algorithms, but maybe we need to start talking more about and therefore advocating and getting more investment in the very basic need of, I don't have a blood glucose monitor. I don't get enough syringes to take the insulin, if I can even get insulin. So how can we work with organizations, and how can we work with the global community to get the voices of this end of the spectrum, which we have, but also the voices across that spectrum?
Yeah, I think that's really super important. The focus is very much on the latest and breaking technologies, because you know what? That's what makes a news story. Nobody really wants to hear about old technology. But I think that there are a number of people who and groups that can actually do that. So yeah, as advocates, we absolutely have a responsibility to do what we are about technologies. It doesn't take anything extra to say, but hey, at the same time, we've got to remember that there are people who are struggling to receive other things, and what can we do around that? And I think building up organisations who are addressing that is really, really important. And then there are health organisations as well, and what's their role in this space? And I know that, yes, absolutely, it's often, health organisations I think have a really unique position, because they are often like a connection point between people living with diabetes, industry and health professionals, and how can they all be brought together? I wish I had answers, because really, I really wish I did. But wherever we can, supporting and doing whatever we can for groups who this is what they're trying to do. Their core business is making sure that things like devices and blood glucose monitors and syringes and and strips for blood glucose monitors are available and accessible to people. And that's really, I guess, what can we do to support those organisations? That's what that's what I really want to be able to do more and more of.
Awesome. Thanks, Renza. And I think so far we've had a really good chat around, the privileges that people might not even realise they have when it comes to accessing diabetes technology, diabetes information particularly as well. So I guess to sort of start to wrap it all up, what are some of your takeaway tips or things that we can sort of do within our own environment to sort of get change going in terms of, following different groups or helping out with raising awareness, things like that? Any last takeaway tips and things you can provide before we sort of wrap up today?
Sure. Ash, I'll take it from there, and I'll end it with our guest, Renza. So the big takeaway for me is, we see this, and we have this focus on, where the investment's going, and not just the investment of money, but the investment of time and the investment of hours spent, whether it's a laboratory or a business, on the most innovative, the newest, or something that's never been done before. And what I think we need to also start to understand and build into our, businesses and build into the organizations and into our governments and, and every party that's a stakeholder is, we need to not only shift the focus, but we need to make sure that there is a focus on, the very other end of that spectrum. While there might be a great return or a great opportunity or a really attractive story with the most innovative and a very new technology, there's just as big of an opportunity to make a difference and improve the quality of life, improve the quality of care, and ultimately make the world a better place for those that might be not able to access their own blood glucose readings on a daily basis. And so we need to look at this holistically and really get to a point where we can allocate funds across the spectrum and make the investment across the spectrum so everybody with diabetes has the basic needs while continuing to advance our technology for everybody that has access to what we would consider to be the most innovative and coolest solutions today. So it's an interest. We gotta kind of move it together. We gotta raise the ceiling, and while we're raising the floor, and we have to make sure that everybody is accounted for. Renza?
Well, I guess when you're having a conversation about people who are not able to access technologies, have those people at the table as well, and make sure that we're listening to them. And I think that's really the only way that people are going to truly understand how dire, I guess, the situation is for some people, is to truly listen to their stories and hear their stories, because you're not going to hear them. They're not the sexy stories that are on the news. So unless you go looking for them, you don't hear them. So I think we have the ability to really make sure that those people are heard and are represented by themselves. We can't be the ones who are talking about and for them. We need to do what we can to make sure that they have a seat just as prominently at the table as we do.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Renza, for joining us on our roundtable with Be the Change. It's been such an honour to have you with the team and chatting about this really important topic. I think we've had some really great in-depth discussions, and I know we've got a couple of people tuning in as well. So if you do have any thoughts, or if you're watching the recording and you have any thoughts, please feel free to chime in with your insights and your experiences as well, because we would definitely love to hear from you as well. So thank you all so much for coming along to our virtual roundtable once again. Thank you so much, Renza, for being here and taking some time out of your really, really busy schedule to be with us. And don't forget to sort of like us, to follow us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates on what we're going to be chatting on our next virtual roundtable, on our next minisodes, and also what's to come for Be the Change as well. So until next time, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll hope to see you around soon. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.